مرحبا بكم مشاهدينا في حوارات السياق. في فرنسا يواجه الرئيس الفرنسي المنتهي ولايته إيمانويل ماكرون زعيمة اليمين المتطرف مارين لوبين في الجولة الثانية الحاسمة للانتخابات الرئاسية المزمعة في 24 من إبريل نيسان الجاري. للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا إيمانويل دوبوي رئيس المعهد الأوربي للأمن والاستشراف. مرحبا أستاذ إيمانويل.
Thank you. Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
ما هي حظوظ ماكرون ولوبين في الجولة الثانية من انتخابات فرنسا؟
Well, nothing is absolutely sure because there's still 14 days to go for this election. Well, a bit less than 14 days. Well, in 2 weeks, the 24th of April, we'll see who will be the next president. But what is quite sure, as it was the case in 2017, the dynamics is with the actual president, Emmanuel Macron, has Marine Le Pen cannot or will not benefit from the potential capacity of gaining the votes of the other candidates, which more or less have all called to vote for Emmanuel Macron. And there's a sort of dilemma for Marine Le Pen. In French, we call that plafond de verre. There is a limit that she cannot go more than cannot gain. And of course, now the polls are giving Emmanuel Macron more or less 54%, and Marine Le Pen 46, 47. She has never been so high. It is the first time that she goes to that extent. As everyone remembers, in 2017, Emmanuel Macron at the same period had 64%, and she only had 36. So she has gained more than 10% of the voters, potential voters. So she is stronger. But again, in our French constitutional system, she has very low chances of winning the poll the 24th of April.
لكن إيمانويل، مع ذلك لم يفز أي رئيس فرنسي بولاية ثانية خلال العقدين الماضيين. هل يمكن أن يفعلها ماكرون؟
Yeah, of course. He can do it because he has in front of him a candidate which no one wants to see in power, which is the case for the progressive vote, the ones who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, more than 20%, the Republicans who have all called, and the Greens, of course, who have all called to prevent Marine Le Pen to go and to win this election. So it's not really the fact that Emmanuel Macron is running for a second term that he will win. That's not the problem. The problem is based on the fact that Emmanuel Macron has in front of him a candidate which no one, a bit out of the system, that no one really wants to see arrive in power.
ميلانشون بات اسمه الآن صانع الملوك. هل يعتمد ماكرون ولوبين على أصوات اليسار المتطرف في معركة الرئاسة؟
Well, Emmanuel Macron is a new candidate. He has no political party, and this is why he's calling to have a sort of Republican front and everyone abiding by what he's proposing to counter or to deter Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen is more based on a traditional extreme right populist vote, and she's doing the job and and coming stronger than she was 5 years ago. And of course, you have to have in mind that Emmanuel Macron is not the first president to do a second term. François Mitterrand also did 2 terms.
من اللحظة الحاسمة لماكرون إلى حماية الضعفاء لمارين لوبين، ما الذي تحتاجه فرنسا في هذه المرحلة؟
Well, of course, it's a bit early to say what French people want because it was not very clear what they wanted with the first round of the elections. Let's go back to what happened a few days ago, last Sunday. 3 candidates weighed more or less the same amount. Emmanuel Macron has had 29% of the votes. Marine Le Pen has more or less 26%, but the third candidate who arrived very close had 22%. So more or less, you have about, let's say, 7, 9, 10 million of voters for each of these 3 pillars of the political landscape of France. But that does not mean that everyone is voting for a candidate. Everyone is voting against a candidate. And that is the important issue of what is going to happen next week. Everyone will not vote the majority will not vote for Emmanuel Macron, but the majority will vote to prevent Marine Le Pen to come to power, because Marine Le Pen is exactly the scapegoat that the French politician landscape has always been trying to push aside, as she is an extreme right. Some consider her fascist. I would not use this term, but an extremist. And in French policy, there's a tendency during the last 60 years is to go in the middle and to try to win the election with a very narrow but certain centrist vote. And this is exactly how Emmanuel Macron won the election in 2017.
هل ستكون الأزمة الأوكرانية أحد العوامل المؤثرة في استقطاب ناخبين لأحد المرشحين؟
It had already been a very huge factor of, first of all, demobilization. A lot of French voters did not go and did not cast a vote, saying that there are more important issues, and of course, tackling with the Ukrainian crisis or dealing with the end of the pandemics. Second of all, the question of the links that some candidates have had or have still with Vladimir Putin has been a milestone of this political campaign. Some were arguing that Emmanuel Macron talked too much with Vladimir Putin. Some others were confronting the fact that Jean-Luc Mélenchon did not denounce at the beginning the invasion of Ukraine by Russia the 24th of February. Others were reminding, and still are, that Marine Le Pen benefited from a loan from a Russian bank in 2017, and that Marine Le Pen has always said that she admired Vladimir Putin. So yes, there is a Putin effect, a sort of Putinophobia, which is, of course, very negative to one of the candidates, Marine Le Pen, who is presented as closer to Vladimir Putin than is Emmanuel Macron, even though some in Europe argue on the fact that Emmanuel Macron is amongst the European leaders, the one who speaks the most, and therefore is criticized for that matter.
كيف سيكون شكل فرنسا إذا فازت لوبان في الانتخابات؟
There will be huge changes. First of all, Marine Le Pen has called for a withdrawal of France from the integrated command of NATO. So there will be a huge effect on our military capacity and our military will or military legitimacy to cope and cooperate with our 29 partners inside NATO. Second of all, Marine Le Pen has called for a reshuffle in the European policy, not saying that she was going to get out of the European Union, but saying she was willing to rewrite some of the treaties and abide or prevent a certain number of policies. The debt, the issue of the debt is a subject, and of course the issue of the deficit. But most of all, there will be huge disruption inside the French society as a certain number of universities, a certain number of trade unions, a certain number of traditional political parties opposed to Rassemblement National and Front National. Of course, the progressive politicians, of course, issued from the Socialists, but also from the Greens. And I have to confirm the fact that even the Republican Party, even the Conservative Party has called to not give any vote to Marine Le Pen, presented as, again, the perfect scapegoat of the French policy.
طيب السؤال المقابل هنا، كيف سيكون شكل فرنسا إذا فاز ماكرون في الانتخابات؟ هل سنكون أمام استمرارية لنهجه؟
I think there will be an exaggeration of the policies that Emmanuel Macron has pushed during the last 5 years. Emmanuel Macron could have a second mandate. He could not have a third mandate. Therefore, he will be very free to do exactly what he has not been capable of doing during his first mandate. A certain number of reforms have been freezed. The Yellow Vests have freezed a certain number of reforms when it comes to the pension, the agenda of the pensions. a certain number of agendas have not been fulfilled when it comes to the nuclearization or the continuation of a nuclear civil policy. Again, the Greens were against that, and he was very eager not to push too much on that issue. Of course, France will be more dedicated to ensure a more independent European policy, because never in any case, the 24th of April at midnight, there will be a new French president who will also be still for 2 months ahead president of the European Council. So there is responsibility for the next president in regards to that leadership and to that mentorship. So France under Emmanuel Macron will be very difficult to govern for another reason. There will be the third round of the elections with the legislative elections, which will happen in June. And that is the most important because, as you know, in the French constitution, the president is the president of France, but the prime minister is the one who governs France. And the legitimacy of the legislative branch is the real pillar of the French power or the French political power. And therefore, who wins the legislative elections wins really the power.
عظيم. أنت جئت على ذكر الانتخابات التشريعية بعد أشهر. ما التهديد الذي تمثله نتائجها؟
Well, first of all, extreme left cannot win the elections. They have no capability of winning the elections. Jean-Luc Mélenchon has made a huge presidential result, 22%, but has only 17 MPs. So there's a disconnection between what the electoral vote at the presidential election and at the legislative. The threat is that it is not the extreme left who could win the election. It is the conservatives who can win the elections. It's the contrary. The extreme left cannot win the elections. They will have more and more voters. They will have more and more MPs. Even the Socialist Party, who weighs absolutely nothing. Anne Hidalgo has made a result something like 2%, a bit less than 2%, 1.6%. If I reckon right. So the question is, but on the other hand, she has a very strong legislative legitimacy. The Republicans with Valérie Pécresse have had only 4.6% of the votes, but they won all of the previous elections. Legislative, well, senatorial, regional, departments, etc., and of course the municipality. And therefore, there very well could be a sort of cohabitation. This is allowed by the constitution, in which the president has a majority which is not his own. He can govern with them. He can make a deal. This is exactly what the former president Nicolas Sarkozy has proposed to Emmanuel Macron in order to have a sort of Republican front, a sort of a government of national unity, in which you have almost every party considering the fact that taking consideration the fact that the pandemic crisis, the 2-year pandemic crisis, the Ukraine crisis entering it in its 51 day tomorrow, and of course the consequences of that when it comes to disruption of economy, when it comes to the necessity to have a strong, robust foreign policy. Some may argue that the time has come to have a technocratic government. Some are saying that nevertheless the results, someone like Christine Lagarde, the former chief of IMF, who is now chairing the European Central Bank, can very well be an acceptable prime minister in order to let France go back on track on behalf of the huge impact of these two crises.
شكرا إيمانويل دوبوي رئيس المعهد الأوربي للأمن والاستشراف للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you.
مشاهدينا شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.